We are going live. We are going live.
Yay, live. Yay, yay.
So we're going to start having folks come in as part of our very first of the series of virtual conversations for Familias Separadas. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. And we're just going to give a minute for folks to come on in. We have some of our attendees coming in right now. So we're just going to give a minute for some of our attendees to kind of show up, and then we're going to get started with our conversation. Welcoming everyone that's joining us right now on our first of 4 conversations around the Familias Separadas project. We give one more minute for folks to join us so that we can get started. Right. So we can get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Angela Ortiz. I'm so happy for all of you joining us today at the first of many conversations that we have in place for the Familias Separadas project. As I mentioned, my name is Michelle. I am the creator of Familias Separadas project that started in 2013 as a public art project really centered around stories of families that have been affected by detention and deportations. I'm a visual artist, a community arts educator, a muralist, emerging filmmaker, and the work that I've been doing within these past 20 years has been focused around amplifying the stories of communities and shedding light on the issues that they're dealing with, as well as projecting the change that they want to see, and utilizing public art as a way to advocate around, in specifically around familias separadas, around the issues of immigration. So we are joined today. I'm going to do some bios and share some information of the awesome people that are joining us today. And so who we have for today is Selena Almazar. Selena, if you can, let me see if I can pin you so everybody can see you. Awesome. And Selena is a Puerto Rican and Dominican artist, educator, writer, social justice advocate. Her art and scholarship examines the intersections of Latinidad, feminism, decolonial practice, and Taino spirituality. She is specifically interested in what it means to be ni de aquí ni de allá, meaning being part of a diaspora that is between spaces and between cultures. And Selena is the project manager for Familias Separadas. And so I'm so happy and grateful to have Selena as part of our team. So Selena will be introducing our other 2 speakers today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. So I'm going to introduce Xochitl Oseguera. She is our connector and is vice president of mamasconpoder.org, or Moms Rising. It's a Spanish language initiative and Latinx community. Oseguera helps lead the organization's highly successful work to educate and mobilize mothers both online and on the ground on issues relating to immigration, economic justice, child health, gun safety, criminal justice reform, and other vitally important issues. She heads and engages with bilingual Latina mothers in the vibrant, fast-growing community she helped create on mamasconpoder.org, and we'll share a little bit more information on how you can get involved with her work. I'm also going to introduce Paul Flores, who is a playwright and also a member of the creative team. And he is a performing artist, playwright, and bilingual literacy advocate who creates and implements successful justice-oriented arts programs for Latino communities in both urban and rural settings. His work incorporates music, dance, and theater as a powerful tool for communities divided by issues of police violence, racism, gentrification, and economic disparity to discover opportunities for solutions, healing, and unification. So thank you, Paul and Xochitl, for joining us today. I'm going to hand it back to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Selena. So I will be sharing a little bit of where we have been doing our work with Familias Separadas. Some of you have either come in contact with the project at different phases. And so this is an opportunity to actually share a little bit of the creation of Familias Separadas, what was the idea behind it. So I just wanted to share a little bit around that work. And basically, it was in 2013, as I mentioned earlier, is when we started, when I started the Familias Separadas project. It was shortly after having previous trips as the U.S. cultural envoy in Juarez and Chihuahua City, as well as already working with Mexican immigrant communities who are undocumented here in Philadelphia. And through those previous projects and really witnessing the impact of immigration, not just around social economic inequalities, but the impact that it has on families and the family dynamic. I am a child of immigrants. I was born and raised in South Philadelphia and live in a predominantly immigrant community here in South Philly and live right by one of the oldest outdoor markets built by immigrant hands. And so for me, the issues around immigration has also impacted me directly in my own family. So I felt that in 2013, during the rise of deportations that were happening in the US, that I felt that it was really important to really create this project to shift the focus and statistics from the statistics and numbers of deportations to really seeing the mother, the father, the brother, the sister that has been torn apart by their families. And so in 2015, I created a number of installations here in Philadelphia, my hometown, my city where I'm based in. And so these were a number of installations and images collected from stories of families that were affected by deportation and how important it was to really showcase, for example, the story of Maria, placing Maria at the center of our city in Philadelphia, where we have all these images of liberty and justice and democracy. And what does that mean when families like Maria and so many others that live and contribute to our city are targeted by ICE, are fearful in being separated? What does that freedom mean for them? And so I felt that it was necessary to really take over these very public spaces. This is City Hall in Philadelphia, and place the image of Maria at the same level of importance of, let's say, William Penn or Benjamin Franklin. And so, the importance of visibility, the importance of placing Maria, we see here her son standing by the words of his father that were recreated. His father was detained in attempting to come back to Philadelphia, and then was detained and served, was really not, I shouldn't say served, was incarcerated for 3 years, separated by his family. And these words that you see here, eres mi todo, come from the letters that Jose would send to his wife Maria. And so each one of these pieces were created. There were a number of 5 installations in Philadelphia in close proximity to these other spaces, like the Love Statue, where people are taking selfies or gathering to play with their families in what was the fountain then. What does that how does that relate to a story of a woman from Honduras, Suyapa, who not only was fighting her deportation here in Philadelphia, but speaks to the difficulty of leaving her 2 sons behind in Honduras. What happens to love when you're forced to leave? And so all of these different installations were created. This is the ICE building in Philadelphia. So these were all of the installations that happened in that first phase of work in 2015. And so this installation was a 90-foot long stencil in front of the Immigration Customs Enforcement building on 16th and Callow Hill in Philadelphia. And who you see here are allies, organizers, families who are undocumented, immigrant families that came together, and I was able to facilitate this installation in front of what you see here is the exit point of where loved ones are then, this building's the first point of detention, and then loved ones are then transported to jails and prisons to fight against their deportation. And so, you know, really utilizing public space to bring visibility around the words and the messages of communities. These words are from Ana, who's a mother from Guatemala, who was also detained with her young daughter at the Berks County Residential Center here in Pennsylvania, which is one of 3 detention centers that detain families, specifically families seeking asylum. And it is the oldest of the 3. The other 2 are in Carnes and Dilly. And so when people think about Pennsylvania and specifically Philadelphia, they don't associate also the connection or the impact of these detention centers, of these spaces, of the system that also lives and continues to affect our communities here. So Familias Separadas came out of that need of wanting to bring visibility to that, and also let people know that you know, we understand that detention, deportation, the issues around that and how it falls into the larger system of mass incarceration does not only begin at the border. It doesn't begin at the border. It is a series of just different systems, unjust systems that affect communities in their home countries, at the border and beyond. And so what I felt that it was necessary was widening that narrative and to say, this is also affecting us. This is affecting us in our city, in our state, and beginning to bring visibility around that. So I'm going to pass it off to Selena, who joined me really in the phase 2 of Familias Separadas, where we started really focusing on families, specifically mothers. At the time, there were 14 mothers with their young children detained for close to 2 years at the Berks family prison. And this phase of work happened between 2017 through, I would say, 2018. And so I was able to begin to connect with the mothers at Berks. Phase 1, I worked with Juntos, which is an immigrant rights organization, as well as community members in connecting with the families. And one thing that's really important to me is working with organizers, with activists on the ground that are doing this work, to be able to build with them and advocate the work, you know, the work towards immigrant rights and justice. And so for phase 2, I worked with the Shut Down Berks Coalition, which is a coalition of also lawyers, organizers, advocates, educators, community members that have been fighting now close to 5 years, a little bit more than 5 years, in trying to shut down the Berks family prison. And so out of that came this series of work that Selena can speak to.
Thank you. So some of this I will reiterate. Phase 2 really developed between 2017 and 2019, including some of the time that we spent scouting locations and settling on the state capital of Pennsylvania as the next main stage. And the goal was to bring awareness of the stories of the 14 mothers detained for 2 years at the Berks County Residential Center, which is the first of 3 immigrant family prisons in the United States. It's a county-run family prison and has detained children as young as 2 weeks old and has a laundry list of human rights abuses. For 5 months, Michelle visited the families while they were detained at Berks and continued to maintain contact with the mothers after their release. Their stories are highlighted in 8 large-scale public art installations, as you see here, in billboards, bus shelters, murals, and a temporary installation on the Capitol steps that we'll talk about in a moment, in the state capital of Harrisburg, and in the Las Madres de Berks documentary, which we'll show a clip of shortly. We'll also share some information and resources on the project. So for the billboards and bus shelters, they were reproductions of Michelle's paintings, and they were installed temporarily in ad spaces strategically located along the road to the Pennsylvania State Capitol building from the highway. The pieces highlighted quotes from one of the 14 mothers who were detained at Berks Family Detention Center, and they were up for about 5 months. What we're watching now is the Capitol steps, and this is titled Karen. It's a vinyl reproduction of another painting of Michelle's, of Karen's and her son's eyes. The installation was temporarily installed in the steps of the Capitol building, and Karen and her 6-year-old son were detained for 651 days at the Berks Family Prison and then deported back to El Salvador. And these 2 phases were really thinking about bringing those families' stories to the steps of decision makers, whereas the permanent mural in Allison Hill was thinking about how do we speak to the Black and Brown communities that are impacted by these stories. So the only permanent installation from phase 2 is the mural of Delmy and her son located in Allison Hill. The mural location was important because Allison Hill is the heart of the Black, Latinx, and immigrant community of Harrisburg. It is located a short distance from the Capitol, yet it is a neighborhood that is historically neglected by the city. The mural elevates the story of Delmy's fight for her son and relates to the many stories of women fighting, sacrificing, and taking risks to give their families and their communities a chance to thrive. The mural became the capstone of the statewide march, which is pictured here. And it was really important for us to also celebrate that our resilience and the fact that we were able to finish this massive undertaking. And it was organized by Michelle and the community partner that Michelle mentioned, the Shutdown Berks Coalition. Mural is also a dedication and memorial to Delmy's life and legacy. And you can see, if you zoom in real close, the quote that's there that says, "Mi hijo es el único que me da fuerza." And we're going to show a short clip of Las Madres de Berks. It's the documentary that shares the testimonials of 4 mothers that were detained for 2 years with their children at the Berks County Residential Center.
Those set of eyes, we really took a look at the moms, you know, as families, as a mom, not as somebody who's here unlawfully or who entered unlawfully, but, you know, as asylum seekers. And we tend to forget that, you know, they are fleeing a lot of things, but yet they're asylum seekers. And having the detention center being so close by, about 40-minute drive from Harrisburg, and then a 50-minute walk from Allison Hill to the Capitol steps, I think it's a good connecting piece, connecting pathway that being so close to the Capitol is so far away from us.
Y al gobernador, pues lo que le dije una vez al oficial de inmigración: póngase en mis zapatos y dígame, ¿qué le contestaría a su hijo si su hijo le dice: mamá, ¿por qué no podemos ir por un helado? Mamá, ¿por qué no podemos ir por ropa? Mamá, ¿por qué no puedo salir? Mamá, ¿por qué no puedo ir a un parque? Mamá, ¿por qué no puedo ser libre? Quisiera que él se pusiera en los zapatos de nosotros y que tomara 2 minutos de su tiempo y que tratara de analizar el daño y el trauma que les está haciendo a los niños. Eso.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say before I hand it back to Michelle is that Las Madres de Berks, I shared the resource link, and you can learn a little bit more about the film. There are also resources and connections to our community partners that have been helping us with this project. And over the past, I would say 2 years, since the film completed, we've done over 30 screenings, including film festivals, educational screenings at colleges and universities, and small group screenings and museum gallery screenings nationwide. So if you have any questions or comments, you can locate most of those answers in that link or ask them in the chat. I'll hand it back to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Selena. So where we are now, which is exciting. So you've seen in less than 20 minutes, many years of work around the Familias Separadas project. And we are now really ready to share what we've been working on since September 2020 on phase 3 of the Familias Separadas project. So I want to invite Xochitl to the conversation. And so where we are with the Familias Separadas phase 3 was really just focusing on other spaces that are very similar to Pennsylvania that are kind of under the radar on around this issue of detention and deportation, and specifically how it affects undocumented immigrant communities. And so I was able to connect with one of the members here in Pennsylvania from Moms Rising, that then connected me to the amazing Xochitl, who you see here, around the work that Moms Rising is doing and Mamás con Poder. And so Moms Rising has basically been our connector in identifying not just the community partners, but also supporters that of the work that we're now expanding to in specifically North Carolina and Colorado and New Hampshire. And so those will be some of the more conversations that will continue after this one, where we will be highlighting each one of the areas and speaking to the work that we're doing there. But I just wanted to give you a moment, Xochitl, to speak to the breadth of work that Moms Rising and Mamás con Poder is doing nationally, if you could share that with us.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you for inviting me, for having me. And Moms Rising is a national grassroots with over 1 million members around the country. And I lead our Latinx Spanish language community, like Selena mentioned, Mamás con Poder. At Mamás con Poder, we give the tools to Latina mothers and our families to take action on the issues that we're working. We're working cross-campaign issues. We have a range of issues from immigration justice, food justice, healthcare, police reform, not police reform, but police brutality, youth justice, criminal and sentencing justice reform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have so many different campaigns, and the good thing about our immigration campaign is that we can educate those members, Michelle. Those members who are taking action in gun safety, we can then talk to them about immigration. They're taking action on childcare education. We talk to them about immigration and the care infrastructure and so on. How we came across Berks was, and with you guys, was about 4 years ago or so, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, we were working at Moms Rising with the wonderful Families Belong Together coalition, over 200 organizations. We were able to work on a corporate accountability campaign, pushing for banks to stop financing private prisons. We were asking our members to demand and urge their banks to stop financing private prisons, where over 70% of immigrant families and immigrant detainees, ICE detainees, are located. And we were able to get 9 banks
Wow.
to declare, to stop, to not to declare, to commit to stop financing detention centers. It is a very complicated process of the loans. Some of them had long-term, short-term, but the happy news is that 87.4% of the loans that are going to the two main corporations, Core Civic and Geo Group, that are making money out of immigrants and the detention of immigrants, are not able to get 87% of the loans. And so it's a huge effort. We mobilized our members all over the country. We also reach out to executives within Inside and employees. The employees of Bank of America, of Wells Fargo, of JP Morgan, we were talking to them and we were letting them know that the institution where they work is facilitating and how it's facilitating. They were outraged. People came out to us, and we use art. Art is a very important tool for Moms Rising because it's a way to change. I unfortunately am not an artist, so I work with artists like Michelle and Paul and Selena to really create spaces for this change to happen. And so right now we are working really hard on making sure that at the national, federal, legislative level, that immigrants are covered in all the packages, that immigrants who have been left before in different COVID relief packages that are included. We know, Michelle, that immigrants are an essential part of the care infrastructure. There is no economy that is going to advance without care infrastructure, and immigrants make it happen. Mm-hmm. We need an immigration reform for TPS holders, for dreamers, for farm workers, for essential workers, and for the 11 million undocumented immigrants that are our neighbors that sit right next to us at school, that are fighting, and that we are going to fight with them. So this part of Moms Rising, working with amazing artists like you guys, is really important as a tool. Like I mentioned, we give lots of tools to our families. Moms are really busy, you guys. We are doing everything. Like, ask a mom, ask a child, what does your mom do? And they say everything. We do everything. And so what we do at Mamás con Poder is try to give different levels of activities to take action, from a simple text, which you could text. You could join or text at moms21. The number is 747464. Again, moms21 747464 is not just for moms, it's for everyone, all the families, everyone who has had a mom or has a mom. And so we give options. We give options, and art, taking action in and participate in projects like this one is one of the tools we give moms to participate and to raise their voices, and to also and for us also to tell all those different non-immigration justice activists and people who are not on our side that we need to talk to them, and art talks to everyone. So yeah. we as progressive, I guess, leaders, we are always talking to each other, and art talks to everybody. We are able to reach people everywhere, from even if they don't agree with us. In fact, those are the people that we want to reach. Those are the people that we want this art to get to. And so I am really excited about our members and our staff, our organizers working alongside with you guys to make this happen. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Xochitl. We shared with our attendees the text and where people can have access to that, and as well as the Moms Rising website. What I can also say is, how just the work that you were saying, right, in terms of connecting from financial institutions to the moms that are doing, making the world move actually, right? So like how important it is to offer all of those resources, but also just thinking of it as, with financial institutions, when we look at immigration and detention, it is a business. It is about making profit off of Black and brown bodies. And so how, I really am grateful for the work that Moms Rising is doing around that, as well as empowering mothers and communities to participate and be active, and meeting people where they are, because that's the other thing, like just thinking about commitments and what people time commitments and what people can do. I just wanted to also give a shout out to some of the organizers that helped us connect with like Shayla and Christina and Linda, and that helped us connect with the community partners in New Hampshire. In Dover, New Hampshire, we have the Americans Friends Service Committee, which will be part of the conversation, and Maggie Fogarty, which will be part of the series that we have here. We have in Raleigh, North Carolina, our community partner, Diamante Arts Cultural Center, as well as another very well-known grassroots organizer, Carmen Gum Rodriguez, who hopefully will be part of our conversation as well. And in Aurora, Colorado, thanks to Xochitl, we were able to connect with the amazing and badass Jeanette Vizguerra, La Jefa, who has been leading the Sanctuary for All movement, and representing there. So I just want to acknowledge that thanks to Moms Rising work, Mamas con Poder, but just the network of people, and again, really supporting our intention as Familias Separadas through the project, and our values set in working with people who are doing this work on the ground. So I just want to say thank you to you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll keep up fighting along your side, because when we see humans, they see money, and that is going to have to change.
Absolutely. And so I think one of the main things in terms of engaging in public spaces and sharing stories is reminding people of not to criminalize us, not to see us as just these dollar bills, but just to see us as other living, breathing, loving human beings, and how important that work is. So thank you, Xochitl. So I'm going to pass it off to Selena, who's going to share some questions for Paul. And I know you have to leave a little bit early, but you'll stick around as long as you can. So thank you, Xochitl.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for emphasizing the importance of artists in this work too. I think it's been really cool to get to know y'all. And I'm excited to also get to know Paul even more in this series. So Paul has been really instrumental in phase 3, as we also had to pivot with COVID-19 restrictions. So a lot of our interactions have been virtual. And a lot of it has been collection of oral histories, which is Paul's specialty. So I want to ask you, Paul, directly, can you talk about why oral histories and narratives in general is important in your work as a playwright?
Thank you, Selena. It's good to actually know you and get to connect with you. I'm also really fortunate to be exposed to groups like Moms Rising and learn more about Xochitl's work. It's really important. It's really imperative that we include everybody in the fight for justice for immigrants, including moms, of course. Moms are key. They are the interface with all the family. Every time you talk to a child in schools, or if you have to interface with anything inside the system, you're going to be speaking with a mom more often than not. So thank you for putting in that work, Xochitl. We need your support. We really do. I think Michelle is one of the most amazing artists that's in the United States right now. Her work is really outstanding, just outstanding. Just those photos that you saw of the bringing immigrant stories to the center of the institutions and government. You can't really like underestimate the impact of that, nor the statement that that is making, that our immigrant lives matter. So thank you, Michelle, for making this such an important project for us to participate in. I am a playwright, and oral narratives to me, or what I would call docu-theater, include creating plays out of real people's stories, often using a lot of the language that they share, but also using theater as a means of figuring out how to represent the larger picture that they participate in, such as the immigration system, right? It's often that we get to interview folks who've been victimized by this system, but it's very rare that people who do the exploitation will give themselves up to a interview. And I learned that by working on Alex Nieto's piece. He was a victim of police violence, and no police officers wanted to talk to me. They didn't want to, So what I took that to mean is, you want to know the police story? Read the newspaper. You want to know the state story? Watch the news. That's the story you're going to hear if you want to know the other side, right? Or the both sides of the story thing. But we have to say that, okay, if the state's going to present this narrative around why certain vulnerable communities deserve violence, hate, dehumanization, then we need to humanize the real people. We need to show their stories, because the apparatus that the state uses with the media is so powerful that it creates stereotypes in people's minds, where they believe that the border, I'm talking about people in Kansas and Iowa and central United States, they believe that the border is just full of, hordes of immigrants trying to jump into the United States, and they create a monster out of us, because they don't live there, they don't know anything about it, they don't have any friends that are immigrants. They just stereotype entirely. So my job as a writer is to expose the truth of and the humanity of folks who have been taken advantage of and victimized by the different systems in the United States, including the immigration system, but also the justice system, the legal system, the education system. So that's what most of my work does. It tries to humanize the victims of otherwise stereotypical people that we see or don't really get to see in the media, including people like me, Latino folks who don't have a voice often or aren't given the microphone. So that's why I do this. And I think this story particularly has been, so eye-opening. As like an activist, I really want to expose the injustice. So, a lot of my focus is on, how ICE treats immigrants. That's what I really want to show, because for me, that's what makes me boil. That's what gets me in the streets. When I see my people being mistreated, that's what makes me get up out of my seat and go outside and protest and organize, like Xochitl's doing. Really, the only chance we have is organizing against this stuff. And that includes artists. Our work can be a focal point for organization, just like Michelle's doing. So, these stories have showcased many different ways, and I'm talking about the people that we've been working with on Familias Separadas, many ways in which the system has taken advantage of immigrants, ways in which I wasn't familiar with, that, I'm talking about persecution, lies, violence, violation, all the things that ICE does to families and individuals, holding babies in prison for 2 years, 3 years at a time. This is ridiculous type of treatment, and a lot of people don't know about it. A lot of people don't can't connect their humanity to it, and that's our job. So let's do that, right, Michelle? Let's do it. Let's get people connected to this so they can feel it.
Thank you, Paul. And I really appreciate you hearing you talk about it in this way, because I think what was so different about this phase from phase 2, and as project manager, I'm lucky to see like all of the working gears behind it. We've been playing maybe the wrong word, but using the idea of powerful and powerlessness and teasing those moments out of the community members' stories. And you've been really instrumental in that, and hearing them and creating these monologues from their stories. And I think it's going to be really cool to see how it all comes together, and really powerful to see how it all comes together alongside the artwork that they've been making. And as the series goes on, we'll be able to hear how this is playing out in each state. So we have 2 excerpts that you're going to read. And one of the excerpts, I'll just say it now so it can just smoothly go, will be in Spanish, and I will share the English text in the chat, and we'll also share that on the links as they're online.
Let's do the Spanish one second, okay? It's probably really important at this point to mention that not all the immigrants we're working with are Latino, nor are they all Spanish speaking. We have a couple African immigrants, and their lives are just as important, and their stories intersect with all the other immigrants who are currently trying to seek opportunities for their family in the United States. So I feel really, honored to read this story by Mark. It's only an excerpt. I am from Africa. I fled my country because of persecution. I left my entire life behind and fled with just the clothes on my back. I lost everything I had ever known, and I am unable to even return to my country. It is like running away from a lion that is trying to eat me up. I came running here for protection and safety. I came here with the hope of starting over again. But what do I get? Instead of protecting me, ICE is pushing me back to go get eaten up by that same lion that's chasing me. By putting me on a plane and deporting me is tantamount to death. That is sending me to the same danger that I'm running from. Eventually, I lost my asylum case. I was very disappointed and scared because I didn't know what was going to happen to me next. I've got several warrants of arrest issued for me in my country just for participating in peaceful protest, calling for a change in the way we are being treated. The same people who are trying to kill me are still there. And if I get deported from here, I would just be walking straight into the lion's den, and they will rip me apart. I fear for my family. I fear for my life. I fear for the lives of my wife and kids who are still very young. It hurts me so badly to think of what will happen to them if I am killed. So that was Mark's piece. These are just excerpts of the stories that folks tell. To reiterate a little bit of what Selena said, we shaped the monologues around moments of power or feeling powerful and moments of feeling powerless inside the immigration detainment and detention center, basically inside ICE. And part of the idea would be to showcase the movement from powerlessness to powerful, so that there is an arc and a hope given to all of these amazing, resilient immigrants who are currently fighting for their asylum. This next one is Ingrid. Ingrid is from Peru. One second. I forgot to pull up the Spanish version. I had it 1 second ago. 1 second. Okay. En el 2016 negaron una apelación en mi caso y esa abogada decía supuestamente que yo calificaba para una residencia porque yo ya tenía a mi hijo nacido en los Estados Unidos y que la felonía no iba a afectar, pero no era cierto. Fui a buscar otras segundas opiniones y uno de los abogados, uno me dijo que con esa felonía no calificaba para nada. Lo único que podía hacer era esperarme y firmar una salida voluntaria. Y él me iba a ganar un stay of removal. Le hice caso y firmé la salida voluntaria, pero no se ganó el stay of removal. Y luego entré a deportación. Mi caso ha pasado, se puede decir, como diferentes doctores, pero diferentes abogados que me han representado en el pasado. Abogados que me han llevado para los suelos, que me declaré de esa felonía, que no debía haberme declarado sin saber las consecuencias. Y ahí sigo de bruta y seguir confiando y ya. Esa salida voluntaria es una barrera para mí en mi vida. Prácticamente estoy en deportación. Ahora tengo 4 años viviendo en la iglesia. Agarré santuario hace 4 años aquí en Boulder, Colorado. Todavía sigo yo refugiada en la iglesia. Ahora mis 3 hijos viven conmigo. Yo tuve a mi hija en 2019 aquí en la iglesia. Con parteras la tuve aquí por miedo de inmigración. Ahora la iglesia es mi casa porque no hay servicios, no hay nada por el coronavirus. Mis otros hijos ya van a escuela, a una escuela privada 3 veces por la semana. Ellos salen, regresan, ellos son nacidos aquí. No les perjudica en nada. No más al frente de deportación yo estoy. Antes era muy diferente mi vida. No había nada de organizaciones o comunidad. Mi vida cambió diferente ya. That was Ingrid. Thank you guys for listening to that.
Thank you so much, Paul. The English version is Selena was able to share that in the chat so you can actually hear the words of Ingrid. Mark is located in New Hampshire, and Ingrid, who is originally from Peru, is located in Colorado. So I just wanted to also speak to kind of like the forming of the creative team. I know that Selena spoke briefly about it, and so did you, Paul. By the way, Xochitl had to leave early, so we just want to thank Xochitl for joining us and sharing the work of Moms Rising, Mamás con Poder, and for supporting this project. So prior to the pandemic, the idea around phase 3 of Familias Separadas was that I would be physically going and doing this work with the community in each one of these sites. And due to the travel restrictions, due to keeping myself safe and my family safe, I really had to kind of recalibrate how this work was going to be done. During this time, it was really just pivoting, this work and figuring out what was the best way that we could still connect with community members, that we can still offer this work. And at the same time, beyond and supporting organizers and activists on the ground, like through our community partners, but also how are we supporting local artists and artists that are doing this work that could really support our work on the ground that we need it. So thanks to the support from the Art for Justice Fund, that is supporting this phase 3 of work, I was able to really figure out a way in which we could enter into the virtual world, and be able to connect with community members that would be able to meet with us. So we did a total of 10 sessions. 5 of them was really focused on the community members connecting with Paul, and as well as Lorena, who worked along with Paul in kind of the um, first drafts or first ideas of how to kind of formulate these stories. Lorena is one of the 4 mothers that was highlighted in the Las Madres de Berks documentary that was detained at Berks for 2 years. I'm very happy to say that her and her child have won their asylum cases, so that's a beautiful victory. But Lorena was also instrumental in connecting with Paul and just really figuring out a structure that Paul was able to create this structure and build from Lorena's story that could serve as an example for the other families that we were connecting with. So what we were able to pull off actually from, what was it, the month of July, January, sorry, from January through April, we did a number of 10 2-hour sessions, and for a good five sessions, which we considered part 1 of these creative sessions was with Paul, and each one of the community members have you know, such a breadth of story, right, to tell. And so it was really challenging to figure out, okay, how can we really focus on a part of the story? And being the master storyteller that Paul is, he was able to create and build these scripts with each one of the community members. So the excerpts that you just heard are kind of the final edits that the community members have approved in what goes out. And this is another thing that I feel that is really important as we are obviously sharing stories of the community members. We're deeply connected to this work, but in the end, the stories belong to the community members. And so how important that we give time and space, which is what Paul was able to do through this process, and having the community members decide and figure out what is the story that they want to tell. How do they want to tell it? What parts of this happens within our sessions internally and stays within us, you know, in terms of the work that we're doing, but then also what finally does go outside, all right, into the world. And I think we handle that with a lot of care. The creative sessions that happen after, the storytelling sessions that Paul did were basically like the foundation of these stories that there are 3 local artists, Peter Marin, who is based in Raleigh, North Carolina. We have Grace Kindeke, who is also from Manchester, New Hampshire. And we also have Jonathan Decamps, who goes between Miami, Florida and Denver, Colorado. And so these amazing local artists, you will be able to know more about within our conversations that are coming up as we're highlighting each one of these locations and speaking to the work there. But we were able to build with the local artists, build a curriculum that we all basically followed. So between Selena and I, we were able to figure out the steps and the work that needs to happen, from sending art supplies and new cameras to our community participants, to then arranging the sessions and finding the best ways to support the community participants in really finding ways to illustrate their story. So based on the story that Paul was able to share and build, obviously that the community partner, I should say, based on the stories that the community participants were able to share with Paul, and the scripts that we were able to create, we were able to then think about the visuals that would support their stories. And that was the work that the visual artist did in the next 5 sessions. So I just wanted to share that process, because one of the main things about having these conversations is to share this process. People see the final product, they hear the final story, but it took many conversations to get to that point, right? And decisions that needed to be made. So I just wanted to share that. And where we are now is we are building and developing the next set of public art installations that will be unveiled in the summer based on the work that we've been doing so far. So I'm just trying to see our time. And I know we have some attendees that are with us, and we want to give some space for questions or thoughts that they might want to share with us. But I also want to explore a little bit with you, Paul, since we have you as part of our panelists too, and you, Selena, too, as well, is just one of the things, or like one of the intentions that I was really pushing forward, especially with this phase, is, you know, obviously what you were talking about, Paul, was like, if we want to see how we're victimized by the system, if we want to know how the system targets us, we can look at the media, we can look at newspapers, we can look at what the institutions actually push out, right? And their side of the story. So I also feel that with the work that I've done before this phase, and in particular with the mothers at Berks, a lot of their the work or the storytelling was really about supporting a campaign, or they're fighting for their cases, right, in the courtroom. And so those stories are really centered around how they've been victimized by the system. And so finding the space, and in particular with the work that I did with the mothers at Berks and the film, finding the space for them to really think about what gives them strength, you know, what gives them light in moments of darkness, what really, you know, what is the future that they have for them and for their children, giving space to really also focus and emphasize their strength and their resilience and their love for their children, how important it is to have those moments as well, right? And so I was really especially more intentional around that for this phase 3 of work. And so the by sharing that with you, Paul, you know, when you spoke about, well, the moments of power and powerlessness, how important it is to speak to those 2 points of views, right? Because even though there are moments of powerlessness, it is also dependent upon what do you do at that moment, right? And so I just wanted to see if you wanted to speak to that, and also in relation to the stories, the total of 8 stories that we've been able to, that the community members have been able to share with us.
Thanks, Michelle. The idea around creating moments of powerlessness that become moments of power came from Lorena, listening to Lorena's story when she talked about organizing the hunger strike inside Burke's family prison. We got into the details of that on, you know, well, how did you get that started? What was that like to not to refuse food? How did ICE react? What were their tactics to break the strike? And she told about how one of the hunger striking moms was offered an apple by ICE, by one of the ICE agents. If she ate the apple, he would let her go right then and there. Eat the apple. You know, I know you guys are on a hunger strike, but if you eat this apple, I'll let you leave right now with your child. She took the apple and ate it. And it was and then they let her go. We don't know exactly what happened to her, but we know that she left she left Berks. It was to me, it was a profound moment in the way ICE manipulates people, but also kind of like, you know, I asked her, did that break the strike? Did you guys all quit after that when one of your own members, you know, kind of took, you know, took a bite of the apple? You know what I'm saying? Like literally broke the strike. And she's like, no, we didn't quit. We kept striking another day, and then ICE threatened to take the children away. So when ICE said, if you don't eat, we're going to take your kids from you, Now, this is the type of tactics that we're talking about. There is no remorse. This is cold manipulation and oppression, right? This is genocidal. Just so you guys know, family separation is examples of genocide. Just so if you ever watch this new show that's out there right now called Exterminate the Brutes, that's on HBO, they give you the examples of what genocide is and how, and when they said family separation is a documented element of genocide, it made me stop. And then I thought about Lorena, and I thought, no one can stand to have their child taken from them. So that hunger strike, what ended up happening was they had to stop it, but they got the word out to the media that they were hunger striking. They connected with the advocates and the allies, and they shared the story of why they were hunger striking, because they'd been incarcerated for almost 2 years with their little kids. That story got out. There was pressure put on Burks, and the next thing you know, Burks is all in the news. And oh my God! So that was power, and eventually she gets out. So I thought, in that moment of powerlessness, where your own people, might, in a moment of weakness, take something that's offered to them that isn't benefiting the whole. Was that a moral loss? And she was like, no, we understood what she did. We weren't happy, but we didn't, lose faith or organization there. We kept spreading the message that we had to stay united. And that unity was really powerful. And so then we took that example, and I asked everybody, all right, let's talk about your experience with ICE. At what moment were you really powerless, that you felt like you were not in control? You were totally isolated. You had no recourse to figuring out what was next, which is pretty much all the time when you're with ICE. You don't really know what's going to happen, and that's something I did learn. They move you around whenever they feel like it. Your property, basically. And then, when were you powerful? When did you feel like you started getting control again? When did you? And a lot of it was when they understood the system, when they figured out how they could advocate for themselves. Whether it was, for instance, a couple of the people had to learn how to speak English so they could talk with the judge. So they literally learned English inside the detention center. And after 2 years, you could pick stuff up. Or like Mark. His powerful moment came by being an African man, one of the only few African men inside of a detention center full of Latinos, Spanish-speaking Latinos, where the Latinos accepted him, and he began to pray with them, and he began to preach. He said, because he knows the Bible, he was preaching, and then more people started to hang out and with him as he was. They got him an interpreter. So they could translate his sermons inside the prison. And then the next thing you know, he goes from meeting with 7 people to meeting with 50 people. And they're translating for him. And then he starts to learn Spanish. And then he starts being able to communicate with people. I mean, that was his power, was that he started to connect with folks, and that they started to pray together, and they started to put good energy out. And then people would go to court and win their asylum case, or win a stay of removal, and they were unified. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So yeah, that was the idea, was to show that even when people are at their most powerless, there is that silver lining they can grab to find their power. So I didn't want to show them just as victims. I want to show them as agents too of their own freedom.
Well, I think highlighting their power is about showing their strength and their light. And I feel that it's so necessary and important in this work, because I think also just how that's going to influence the public artworks, right? Because by just telling the story of the powerlessness, the pain, the violence that is inflicted upon our communities, and specifically undocumented immigrant communities, that is also a trigger, right? It is by seeing that story, and someone is either looking at a piece of artwork that represents that pain and either sees a memory or experiences a memory of them experiencing that very same pain, or it is their worst nightmare, right? To be living in this country and to know that moment that could be them or their child or their husband or a family member, right? And so I think that one of the things is we've been developing this work, and for example, with the celebration that we did in Allison Hill, which was like, okay, we started with the march, we started the Capitol steps, but the idea for us to land really at Allison Hill, in the words of Delmi, about her son being the only one that gives her strength, is really about reinforcing that community love and power, and how important it is to remind ourselves of that, right? And to have these moments of joy in the midst of all of this that is happening, all of these obstacles, all of these systems that affect us and that target us, right? And so that's why, I think the direction in which we took with the scripts and around power um, is also necessary in this conversation, right? It's like, yes, we know it is important to talk about statistics. It's important to talk about, how many people have been deported, not just recently under the Biden administration, right? And when I tell people that Familia Separada started in 2013, that was under the Obama administration. So it's understanding too just the politics that exists, right? And how it continues, broken promises, or the heavy work that still needs to happen. And that is always going to be present. But what is also very present is that strength and that power that we have, right? As individuals, as mothers, as fathers, as people who love, their families, right? And so how important it is to also reinforce that and to bring that to light and to amplify that. Um, what I want to share is that in Dover, New Hampshire, so each one of these 3 locations, there is a detention center that is in close proximity to the community participants that we connected with. So in Dover, New Hampshire, there's the Stratford Detention Center. In Aurora, there's the Aurora Detention Center, in Aurora, Colorado. And in Raleigh, North Carolina, there's the Wake County Detention Center. And each one of the participants that we have really been in contact with and have shared their stories have either been detained in one of these facilities or has had a loved one detained. So it's really speaking to, again, the system of mass incarceration, of profiting off of Black and brown bodies, as I mentioned before, in immigrant detention, and specifically how this connects with the participants and the community members that have committed their time and their energy in sharing their story. So there's more to come. We will be having a few more conversations. The next conversation is going to be focused in speaking to the creative team in Colorado and our community partners in Colorado. Then the following session, I believe, is going to be New Hampshire, where we'll be connecting with our partners and our community, our creative team there as well. And the last conversation will be in North Carolina. So I was trying to keep the space open for any questions that might pop up from our attendees. But I was wondering if there was anything that you wanted to add, Paul or Selena, before we, again, we're still waiting for more questions to come in, but we can also share information on the next conversation, invite people to register for that. So any thoughts that you want to share about the process that we haven't covered, or anything else that you want people to really know about this project?
I think some of the things we chose to focus on were image based. I thought that was great. Like, how do you take text and translate it to public art? That's a very complicated thing. And when we imagined this, we had originally thought there would be live performance. that the storytellers would be able to share and interact with the visual artwork. I don't know if that's going to happen. I hope it does somehow, but we had to change the process, and in the process, thinking about how stories lend themselves to visual and physical experience. And I liked the lion in and how we remember, or the apple, la manzana, right? These moments in these stories that have these visual tropes that are so loaded, right? The lion and this guy, the lion in Africa, but also the lion and Jesus, and the apple, and the devil, and it was so wow, like, and then the words that are associated with those kind of moments of power, or moments of even joy or hope, right? And we tried to capture those, and then focus those as kind of like, okay, let's blow those up.
Yeah.
And I like that you guys are working with visual artists like Peter, and the others, whose job is going to be to find out how do you visually represent these amazing stories.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm glad that that's happening.
That's the challenge. That's where we are right now in terms of the possible.
How to put it in the middle of a city, right? Like how to make it.
Yeah, well, it'll definitely be very visible, and that's something that we're definitely working on at this moment. So when I tell you it's in process, it's because we're in the middle of it right now. But I also think that in terms of the stories and how they're represented, pre-COVID, we were trying to figure out, like, yeah, with the intention of doing these live performances. And so other alternatives in which we're thinking about is now that we're in this virtual world, we're doing a virtual conversation, is how to actually bring these stories to people, right? Whether it is through their phones or through their screens, and also have it in a way that still really deeply connects to the work, right? And so the great thing that we have been able to do, thanks to your work, Paul, with the community members, is have a beautiful collection of the audio stories of each one of the community members sharing their stories. And that's definitely going to be accessible to people, whether they're able to physically go and see the artwork in person in their respective cities and communities, and or see it virtually, and being able to capture that. And we are trying to work also on, if there is any performance or action or activation, what will that be and how that would happen. And obviously Paul and I, we were been like, okay, what's the next phase of work? So we're definitely working and percolating on that, because the work continues, right? And that's the beauty about it, is just like, as artists, like, how can we create these platforms for these stories to be heard? And so if figuring out, like, one, I always say one phase of work, or when I finish one project, it really informs what the next stage is. So by then, as we're looking towards the future, we are no longer in quarantine. We're able to connect in person, and figure out ways to, like, also bring these stories into the spaces with other people and with the community members as well. So yeah, but we're definitely working through this work. You have a question, Selena, that you wanted to share? Or we have a question? I can't hear you.
I wanted to say that there should be a tiny hand for the attendees that are still here. So if you wanted to raise your hand, we can give you the opportunity to speak if you feel more comfortable saying your question, or you can just go ahead and put it in the Q&A area, or send a message to the panelists. There's a lot of different options. So we have a question. It says, I am an educator in my school. Half of the students are immigrants and many are undocumented. I would like to know how I can educate the parents of my students.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Well, I guess the question is where is this person based? That's what's really important. I think one of the things that I share with folks is that, for example, in wanting to expand this work for familias separadas, that's one of the reasons why I connected with Moms Rising and Mamás con Poder, because they were able to identify who were the people that were doing the work on the ground. And that's extremely important. And I think that a lot of times the resources already exist. They're already there in your community. And so I think that it's just a matter of asking and finding information out. At least in Philly and in my state of Pennsylvania, I knew who I needed to connect with and build with. But once I expanded out to, as I mentioned, Colorado, New Hampshire, North Carolina, I really needed the help of Moms Rising, Mamás con Poder, to be a connector. But also, I was very clear on who it is that I felt would be the right fit for this work, right? And to see the value of this work within their immigrant rights work as well, right? To see it as a tool versus just something extra, right? And I think that that's also important. So that would be my question. I don't know if they answered it, but the first step would be if there is already an immigrant rights organization or coalition that exists within your community, and finding out what are some resources that are available that you can share with um, families. One of the things that I've done here, Juntos has these like little pamphlets of what to do, questions to ask if ICE is at your door or you're at risk of being deported. And what I've done is that, I've shared it within my social media, but also even in my community. I have neighbors. I'm a my comadre. I've shared this information with loved ones and neighbors because I feel that it's important, right? And so sometimes that information already exists. It's just a matter of how can you have access to it and be able to share that information. What I also want to add for educators, Las Madres de Berks is available for educators. There are, there's kind of these different tiers of sales for the film, and a percentage of the sales go back to the families that are featured in the film. So that you can find that at lasmadresdeberks.com that Selena had just shared. And there's also a bilingual facilitator's guide. So there are letters that the mothers wrote to their children, and also illustrations that are in this facilitator's guide, as well as conversations or prompts on how to have these conversations around the different topics that really are present in the film, in the 30-minute film. So for individuals, there's a specific fee. But then also if there's a school or an institution that wants to purchase it, then that would mean that the entire school, like the rest of the teachers, will have unlimited access to the film and actually show it in the classroom and use it as a tool. What's really important is that the film is utilized and that it can help educate others around this very critical and still current issue that we're facing around family detention and immigrant detention. Any more questions?
Like all of the questions, we got to thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I'll just add really quickly was from my perspective as a project manager and as a younger artist, and as somebody who I see Michelle as a mentor. It's been really great to be part of this process and get to know how many different kinds of art can be sort of folded into movement work. So with phase 2 for the march, we had musicians come and sing while we were marching. We had photographers come and document the process. And then I think sometimes when we think of public art, all you think of is murals, but even with this project, we're thinking of amazing creative ways to unveil these works. So it's been really cool to learn from each other, to connect with other artists. And I just feel like you've been such a good example of what real collaborative work could look like. So thank you.
Well, I would say thank you too. I mean, the thing is that I don't do this work by myself, right? And so what I love is that you have such an amazing and beautiful brain, Selena, and just, but also you're able to kind of see all of those levels and intricacies, right, too. Whereas, I think if we were just solely focusing on muralism, it wouldn't allow for that space to happen. So to be able to think about, like, now we're figuring out, like, how are we broadcasting this, how are we sharing this out with folks, how are we documenting this in a very different way than being there in person, right? So I'm very grateful for you and Paul, of course. One of the things that I shared with Paul, and this is also a reflection around just like self-care, and a lot of people ask me, like, well, these stories are like really like heavy, and a lot of times there are very tragic moments, but then there are also very beautiful inspirational moments, right, that I leave with. And I think after going like from 2017 2018, and seeing the mothers that I was connecting with in prison, then being released, in their lives after, and their continued struggle afterwards, right, that was a lot of just work, right? And I wouldn't necessarily say, the emotional toll that it has on its mother has had on the mothers. It's like mine is like super minute, right? Because I'm just witnessing this. But it's still about how, as artists, as people who feel, right, and want to support our communities, that still affects us emotionally and mentally, right? And so I knew that coming into this next phase of work, with the support of the Art for Justice Fund, was like, okay, well, if I want to move this forward, how can we do it in this way in which I can have another person that can support the storytelling, that is able to receive these stories. And so it's very grateful for Paul, because we were able, like, and sometimes when stories are being told, that you just don't know what's going to be said, right? And so by Paul being kind of the first point of contact with these stories, that I know that when Paul was going to come to us and say, okay, yes, I've done this interview, and these were some of the really like punch to the heart moments, right? I felt like, oh, I can now prepare myself for that, right? And so I think that, as work as artists, and it's not just about creating beautiful works or creating public artworks, like, we are supporting and feeling every moment, right? And so how are we taking care of ourselves? And for me, part of that self-care was like, okay, who else do I know that not only has the skills but believes in this work, can be true to the storytelling in the sense of Paul's role, but also with the other artists that are involved. When we were looking at the selection of these artists, it was really about skill and their connection to the community, right? And how both of them have value. And that's extremely important in the work that we do. So I'm just so proud of our team, because we've been able to not just expand our team, but also have brilliant minds together supporting this work. And yeah, I'm so, again, grateful for that. And I can't do this by myself. So I feel like that's something that's really important for people to know. It's really about building these relationships, and finding the right posse to do this to do this work with. So
I
awesome.
totally feel that. I think people should remember that.
Yeah. I mean, Paul, I don't even know how I mean, I think if we say how far back we've known each other, or when we met, that's gonna like reflect how old we are. Because and Selena's like, Michelle's a lot older. I was like, only a few years older than Selena. But Paul and I have known each other a long time in terms of just knowing each other's work, right? And so we were able to reconnect with Nalak, and
Yes,
also a
got to give
recipient.
love to Nalak.
Yes, and so I want to shout out to Nalak, who's been another like instrumental organization in my life, and being able to connect with awesome, badass artists like Paul. And so by having that connection, I was like, oh yeah, like it just kind of was like the universe like reminding me like, hey, you got your people, you just gotta like get them all together. So yeah. I see Peter saying yes, posse. Like we definitely have a posse. It's
I just
my
think
crew, my crew.
you, Michelle, you can't like really underestimate that part about self-care in creating this work. I really think that a lot of artists push so damn hard just to get their work out that
Yeah.
you know, it takes its toll health wise, but also you know, spiritually and mentally, emotionally on you. And you know, the last thing you want is to be afraid to hear the stories around you because you've just been so full, had too many of them. So that's why we lean on each other, I think, to, you know, to, hey, I need you to be this play this role for me, and you know, I'll play this role here. And I felt like that was a very organic way of doing it. And when we finally shared the stories, you know, everybody cried just hearing them. And um, the artist doesn't leave the story with the artwork; it stays in their bodies. Um, it stays in their souls. All the stories that we hear, and I don't really think that that's something people understand. Especially folks who are trying to represent the stories of incarcerated or traumatized folks so that we can humanize them. So I really thank you for putting the faith in me to do that with authenticity and honor. So thank you, and I would do it 100 times with you. You're an amazing artist, and Selena also. You have been such a wonderful support and artist in this project. We have a long way to go, and I'm really proud of you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. So unless there's any more questions, so I just want to say thank you to you, Paul, to Selena, to Xochitl, who had to leave a little bit early from Moms Rising, in kind of kicking off the first of the 4 conversations that will be happening this month of May, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our next conversation is happening May 12th. And we will have Jonathan Decamps, who's one of the who's a great photographer, videographer, and teaching artist, as he's listed here, as part of our creative team, who has been doing this work with 3 community members in Colorado, and so 2 of the community members have been in sanctuary, and one of the community members shares a story of her husband who has been deported, and so we will have Genevieve Guerra, who is a community participant, as well as the founder of Sanctuary for All, who is, yes, as Paul says in the chat, is powerful. If we talk about power, that's Jeanette right there. She's just is fearless. So we're just so happy to have Jeanette being not just as an advocate, as a community partner through Sanctuary for All. I also want to give a shout out for the support of CIRC, which is another organization that offered support. And also for this particular work in Colorado, we were able to get additional funding from the Bonfils Stanton Foundation. And so there's just amazing work that's happening in Colorado. And so we're going to have, the conversation is not just going to be centered around what we're doing with the Familias Separadas project, but also to have space for Jeanette and our community member to really share about what is going on in Colorado. And we have folks who are in Boulder and Aurora and in Denver, Colorado. So we're able to kind of gather some of those perspectives, but that's the intention for these conversations, is also to create awareness around what is happening around the immigrant rights movement in each one of these locations that we're working with, as well as open the space for the artists and the community members to share a little bit about their perspectives and process around this work. So please join us so that you can have the whole kind of like span of conversations and work that we have been doing. And I just wanted to also just say, like, it's when I say national, like, policy, coming from us from San Francisco, we have Selena coming from us from Lancaster, PA, and I'm here in Philly. So it definitely is like being able to do this work virtually has been able to really focus and support this national work. So it's just so great to like make those connections happen. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. Please join us next Wednesday. Take care. Bye.